am so excited for this conversation. So much so that I'm up at 5 a.m. in Pokhara, Nepal to to make it happen because it's funny. My next guest, um, there are so many parallels in my story and the story you'll hear. It's a little bit uncanny. And when I first stepped down from the fund, I kind of shared my story. I genuinely had about 10 people say that I needed to talk to this man. So I have before this conversation, and now we're hitting record. I am joined by Andrew Johns. Andy, welcome, man.
Thanks, Scott. It's good to see you again. I look forward to chatting with you and hearing about your story and sharing more of our parallels.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I think I kind of look at some of your posts and read some of your writings, and it does feel like, you're be just a few years ahead of me on my journey. Not that those are always linear paths, but um, it's just been really cool to see and kind of has given me hope at different periods when things get tough and maybe I think I've totally lost my mind that there are other seekers out there that come from at least a familiar world to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Don't worry, you've only lost the mind that no longer serves you. Um,
Hmm.
so you're letting go of the mind that served its purpose, and now it's time to find the thing that's underneath the, I guess you could say, artificially constructed mind that used to be in control. So. Yeah, it's not such a bad thing to lose your mind.
Maybe that should be the goal. Is could we try so hard to create this ego, this mind structure, and then we got to just blow it up at some point. But it fights back. I'm finding pretty hard.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah, yeah. It fights back. I mean, that's been my experience too. I left behind my career in tech. Um, let's see, a little over 5 years ago. It was actually September 19th of 2020 when I moved out of Silicon Valley, and it was pretty short thereafter when I uh, sort of placed the phone call to my partner and said, "Hey, I'm stepping down from the venture firm." And I was just in a place where I knew intuitively on the inside, if anything, it was just screaming at me, like, I can't do this anymore. It was such a
Mhm.
uh, an overwhelming feeling of misalignment. I didn't have that term for it then. All I knew, almost at like an animalistic level, was I'm done with this and I got to let it go. And the last 5 years has been that recursive process. It's really shaped in my sense, kind of like a spiral, maybe an upward moving
Mhm.
spiral of
Mhm.
sort of drifting back and forth between the old world, the old identity, the old career, and what lies ahead. And so I can really relate with you. And um, yeah, it's been a heck of a journey. But I'm happy to open up about any and everything that's happened in these last 5 years because it's been a heck of an experience in a lot of unexpected ways.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to kind of pick it pick it apart, and we've had other guests kind of describe their journey that they're on as this upward spiral of consciousness, and I think that's a good way to look at it. I think when I first started, I liked the sort of analogy of two mountains. Like I had, climbed this one mountain, kind of got to the top ish, and it didn't bring me any happiness or success. So I got, you know, universe kicked me right off, and then I went on this new journey of this second mountain, more in service and truth. But it's not a. I like the spiral better because the mountain you're constantly getting kicked down, so it doesn't feel like you're just climbing this second mountain. But
Yeah,
um,
yeah. And just to comment on that, like the thing I like about the mountain metaphor in particular is the valley that sits between two mountains. Not
mhm,
necessarily the metaphor of there being a second mountain, because at least this was my experience, is, the first mountain of life, call that the linear path of success. And it felt like a mountain because you're continually sort of pushing up to higher and higher summits. Um, and then eventually, as you mentioned, you sort of get to the top of it and you realize, like, wow, the air's really thin up here. I can't stay here very long. I need to go down. And then you enter that valley, and the valley, frankly, it sucks because it's
Mm.
the deconditioning of the mind and the body from everything it was programmed to do in terms of climbing up that first mountain. And I really like the valley part of it because it's low, it's dark, it's uncertain, and for me and for many folks I know, that valley is sort of covered in fog, and so there's no clear
Mhm.
path ahead. You actually have to wander through it somewhat blindly in an attempt to come back into contact with who you are and what you really want, and to allow your body to acclimatize from being off of, these mountains, so to speak. The thing I don't like about it is the second mountain. If you stick with that metaphor, is it implies that the second half of life also has to be some big mountain to climb.
Mhm.
And uh, that's sort of bringing back to the original conditioning of, okay, well, I climbed these career and professional mountains. I became CEO of a company, or an experienced executive or a venture capitalist, whatever it is. You can put 15, 20, 30 years into something, and that's your mountain. And sticking with that mountain metaphor then reinforces this idea of, like, okay, I got to go on some second big ascent of life. And it may not be like that. It may not be like
Mhm.
that at all. It may be the complete opposite. It may be like floating down a river.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that's where, like, there's pros and cons of the mountain and valley metaphor. And I think this cyclical spiraling thing has its own benefits. Primarily for me, I really stick to that because when I remember stumbling upon some of Carl Jung's writings, and he had a term called circumambulation. And it's a fancy word for basically, like, imagine there's the sun and sort of planets orbit around it. They circumambulate around the sun. And where this is relevant in a human development and an individuation sense is that the sun is our true self. That's the center that we're searching for. That's the center that deep down was asking us to get off that first mountain of life and come find it. And during this process, we circumambulate around the center. And like with any orbit, sometimes you're far away from the sun, and sometimes you're very close to it. And then you swing far away again, and then you're close to it. And this process of individuation, of deprogramming the self, the false self, and coming back into touch with, like, who am I really? And what is the life that I really want to live? It is that ambulating process where sometimes in this journey, you get very close to the sun, you get very close to your true self, and you feel it, and you come alive, and you capture a little bit of it, and you're like, oh, I got it. And then you swing away from it. And then
Mhm.
when you swing away, that's
Mhm.
when you feel like, ah, shit, I'm lost. I got to go back to Silicon Valley. Have I made a mistake? Who am I? What gurus do I follow? Just all the uncertainty,
Mhm.
but trust that in time, that circumambulation is going to bring you back closer to the self. And the point is that over time, that orbit gets closer and closer. And each time you take a little bit of your authenticity with you until someday these two orbiting bodies, they actually merge. It becomes,
Mhm.
this invisible threshold is crossed, and you realize, ah, oh, I'm there.
Mhm.
I am
Mhm.
who I sought to discover.
Yeah, that's really powerful imagery, and yeah, it may hopefully not going too abstract for our listeners, but it really reminds me of I had this uh, call it a vision after doing some pretty serious work um, at a retreat. This was about three years ago. So I'm kind of starting to feel misaligned, and but I'm trying really hard to ignore it, and I'm still pretty deep in my ego, and I very clearly kind of saw in my mind's eye this, in your metaphor, like the sun, this soul that was me, and there were these planets, there were these things circling it, which were like my ego and all these different characters that I had created that at one point were there to help me get through hard things, when I was young, and we all go through different things. And they had started like protecting me. So they were circling kind of my soul. And at first it was there to protect. And in my like vision, they sort of kind of like built a wall around me. And that wall just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And they just kept circling and kept circling. And every rotation they'd build like a new wall until that like sun or that soul was completely covered up. And the things that were helping like no longer even knew that they were helping anymore. They were just there to build this wall essentially, and had this really powerful experience of sort of breaking through that. And even as you're talking, it's a reminder that it's not about getting rid of those planets or the characters or the identity. It's like integrating them. Can they become one with that like sun and that soul more? Which
Hmm.
is tricky because some of them have qualities that I'm like, I don't need you at all anymore. Just you can just fuck off completely.
Yeah, just
you know?
fucking let me go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but anyway, so kind of to bring it back, um, you know, and you're a very humble person. You kind of breezed over some of your incredible accomplishments, and you know, I'll just paint the picture a little bit. So you've been a early employee at some, call them generational tech companies, like Facebook, Twitter, now X, Quora, and you went on to eventually become president at Wealthfront. Big, big roles. And then after, you get into VC and you're a founding partner at Unusual Ventures, a grand, fantastic firm, build out the consumer arm there. And, from the outside, you kind of go on your LinkedIn and you just look at a few sections, you did it. That's like the tech dream. Where did that dream first start getting holes kind of poked into it? Was there a specific moment in time where maybe you had your first wake up call, whether it changed your life or you completely ignored it, as many do?
Quick pause to thank our partners. This episode is brought to you by Optimizing.ai and DreamFuel. Optimizing AI uses artificial intelligence to reveal exactly how your audience and users feel about your product demos, campaigns, tutorials, onboarding videos, or really any digital experience. They're going to track vital signs and stress levels, and you can join their waitlist now in the show notes. And by DreamFuel. DreamFuel is a mental performance coaching platform for leaders and teams. DreamFuel's elite coaches are going to help you achieve your goals, but do it in a way where you're also lowering stress levels, feeling more aligned, and tapping into kind of your highest purpose and highest calling. Each month, they are nice enough to give away a handful of free one-to-one coaching sessions for listeners of the Wake Up Call. So go to the show notes and claim yours now. Even that one session can make a really big difference. All right, back to the show.
Oh yeah, yeah. The circumambulating. It actually started when I was 27. I was working at Twitter at the time, and one week I suddenly started to have very severe panic attacks. I didn't know what a panic attack felt like. All I knew was that I felt completely overwhelmed, sheer panic, on the verge of tears virtually all the time. My heart was always pounding. I was having all sorts of cognitive issues with focus. Um, and I one day actually went into the office at Twitter. I'd take Caltrain, I'd take the train from the peninsula up to the city, and I remember that morning having like really disturbing thoughts about people dying, about myself being injured and dying, just uncontrollably. I now understand those as intrusive thoughts, one of the symptoms of a panic disorder, or as I later found out, complex PTSD. And I got to the office, and then finally, it was about 10 a.m. I could tell I was on the verge of breaking down. So I just very quietly threw my stuff in my bag, walked out of the office, immediately went back to the train, got on the train, sort of pulled the hoodie over my head, and I just sobbed in the corner of the train, all the way back down to the Palo Alto area. And that's when a bunch of uh, the emotional residue of long buried trauma from my childhood just sort of burst through at a time when I was actually finally safe and secure in my life. And trauma and emotions, it's, the wisdom of the body is incredible because it often will wait until you're safe and secure for it to come up, when you're capable, potentially capable of handling it. And so that initiated, at first I thought like, oh my God. I remember having this terrifying thought, like I'm losing my mind. I'm gonna die like my mom did. So my mom died from severe mental health issues when I was 10. And she was in and out of psychiatric hospitals and rehabilitation centers, and there are all sorts of like really, really difficult experiences in the lead up to her passing and afterwards. And when that thought hit me, it was just, you know, full panic. And I didn't know what to do other than like, I need help. And so I sought out for therapy. And that started about a 3-year process of beginning with therapy, actually turning to some medication to help my highly dysregulated nervous system. I began some of the trauma work to sort of dig into some of the very difficult memories, and that's truthfully when it started. Um, but I sort of eventually I got stable enough and did a little bit of healing, a little bit of developing more self-awareness, and then I pushed that beach ball back down underwater, and I continued on with my life and with my career. And truthfully, over the next 10 years, that beach ball kept popping up, and I would deal with a little bit of it at a time and then push it down and continue on this relentless path of achievement and success. Because ultimately, like, not only had that sort of become the dominant narrative in my mind, that was the center of my ego, but it was also one of the primary coping mechanisms to help me avoid the pain that I'd been avoiding for a long, long time. So that's truthfully when it started, and it continued like that up till this day, where essentially during this spiraling period, this circumambulation, what I've noticed is that over that roughly 13, 15-year time frame, um, I allowed that beach ball of pain and stuff I wanted to avoid pop up enough for me to work on it and do a little bit of inner engineering, and then push it back down and then go through sort of a long period between the next time when the beach ball popped up. But as time went on, I was more and more capable of sort of revisiting that beach ball of pain in shorter intervals. And yeah, that's when it started, and truthfully, it's still continuing. Where it was earlier this year, where I had the most intense or acute part of this entire journey. I think my mind was preparing for it the whole time, when in the midst of what is referred to as a spiritual emergency or a deep emotional crisis, I unearthed a long buried trauma that had been there the whole time that I couldn't recall. It was it happened very, very early in my life. And I think that that was one of the core wounds that was underneath it all. And it wasn't until earlier this year that my psyche finally opened up enough to allow that really severe trauma to burst through. And I had to directly encounter it. And very, very difficult. But here I am moving forward.
Mhm. Here you are. Thank you for sharing your story, and I'm sorry to hear about your mom. I can't imagine at that age. And this idea of this beach ball again, I think is a really good metaphor, and I can resonate with a very prolonged period of time. I would say mine was about probably 8 years or so, where I would do some work, uncover some things. It would become too much. Okay, we push that down. Safety for us is success, achievement. Let's go back to that. I feel comfortable in this world, and we'll go. Um, and and I would love just like your thoughts on this, because it seems like it's almost like a reckless thing to do. Like we call this work for a reason. And if you're going and you're doing intense therapy or coaching or medicine ceremonies, or doing all these new modalities, and you're not maybe honoring them or respecting how powerful they are, and you're bubbling up these things in your psyche that maybe have been repressed for decades of your life, or you kind of have them on the periphery, but you've gotten so good at compartmentalizing. Um, like, I guess my question is it? I guess we have to dive into this stuff. Like, not everyone can just stop what they're doing and go on a uh, spiritual journey. But I think, looking back on my own journey, I would do some of those things, I think, a little bit differently, because I think I made it harder on myself than it had to be. I don't know. What are your thoughts on, like,
Mhm.
I know I was trying so hard to, like, I'm gonna fix myself, but I'm gonna keep the train on the track. We gotta play this character, but we're gonna fix this character at the same time. And it was so challenging to do.
Exhausting.
What was exhausting, exhausting. Trying to play God is exhausting. You're trying to, like,
Yeah.
keep all these narratives and do all these things and fix yourself and fix other people, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's very
The
tough.
thing I'd say about that is, yeah, a couple points. One is that, especially when it comes to these trauma-based experiences, for not everyone has traumas, but if they have severe childhood traumas, sexual abuse, death of a parent, whatever it may be, the mind does what it needs to do, and so does the body. I sort of hate using mind and body because it reinforces that idea that these are separate things. It's all one, but it'll push away what it can't handle because as a child you haven't fully developed intellectually or emotionally. You're still going through the process of development. And if I was 11 years old and I had to confront and face what I faced in my 30s and early 40s, I wouldn't have been able to. It would have destroyed me. It's just too much, too overwhelming. And so the first I'd say is, like, be thankful for the wisdom of the mind and body to do what it does, which is say, you know what? I can't handle this right now. I'm going to put that away, and I'm going to find ways of covering it up and sort of distracting myself or giving myself other things to focus on for the purpose of survival. And
Mhm.
it's remarkable at doing that. How many high functioning traumatized people have you met or do you know? A lot. thank God for the intelligence that we've been given. Um, the second, I'd say, to your point about like, respecting the process is it's sort of an issue of modern context, modern Western context, is that to approach these really, really, really difficult traumas and work through the emotion attached to it, you need an incredible container of support. That container used to be our tribe. We heal best when in the when in a concert with others and supported by others. Typically, that's actually when things tend to surface. One of the ways in which we feel safest is when we're around a group of people we love, and then things will come to the surface. And so in the modern context, a lot of it is like, okay, you as an individual go into this therapist's office and talk about it. And it's like, it's somewhat helpful, but it absolutely is not the ideal environment for the safest and deepest healing to take place. I think this is what indigenous and ancient cultures really understood, which is why they developed an elaborate set of ceremonies. And these ceremonies were, groups of people holding you through a difficult process. And just to give uh, an example of this, like I don't know if you've ever seen the show The Dog Whisperer with Caesar Milan.
I think,
Um,
yeah, I think so. I've seen a
yeah,
couple episodes for sure.
really famous. He's been in the game for, I don't know, 15 years or whatever. And I noticed one thing, which is if you watch enough of his episodes, you'll see that roughly 9 out of 10 times he'll go to see a dog and their owner at their house, and it's a dog that has behavioral issues. And then most of the time, it turns out no, it's actually an owner that doesn't know how to like establish themselves as the pack leader, doesn't know how to actually work with the psychology of the dog. So Caesar just works with the owner much more than he works with the dog. And then the owner learns, oh, this is my role. They assume that role, and all of a sudden the dog's behavior quickly changes. And then there's the 1 out of 10 times where the dog has really bad behavioral issues. Maybe it's aggressive or violent. And in those cases, it's almost always because the dog had a bad background. It went through some shit. And so the dog's behavior is a perfectly rational adaptation to its traumatic upbringing or its experiences. And so in that scenario, Caesar utilizes the secret weapon, which is he says, okay, we're not going to do any of this dog training stuff or even the human training stuff. I'm going to take your dog and I'm going to bring it back with me to his dog psychology center where he has a pack of like 50 other dogs. And he then slowly integrates that dog back into a pack. And within the container of the pack, the dog learns how to be a dog again. It learns how to trust, it learns how to play, it learns how to love, learns how to receive and show affection. And it's in that container where it works through its challenges. And then maybe 30 or 60 days later, that dog is healed largely due to the healing capacity of a group of other dogs around it. And in the modern context, we tend to not have that, especially in the Western psychotherapeutic framework. That's why, we turn to these psychedelic experiences or breath work or ashrams or whatever it is, because um, sure, it may have an indigenous method that's very beneficial for healing, as I've experienced with psychoactive medicines. But a big part of it is like the container that you're held in by a group of people, where the inherent wisdom of the mind and body knows that this is a place where it can let go and heal. Um, so that's the other thing I'd say about respecting this process of healing. And the third, sort of related to that, is in this there's really amazing benefits in the so-called sort of new age movements around sort of in modern industrialized folks or westernized folks exploring ancient traditional methods from shamanic cultures, from religious and spiritual traditions, such as those that you're surrounded by in your part of the world right now. Like it's fantastic. You know, they figured out how to like help us heal and evolve thousands of years ago, well before we needed a bureaucracy and, you know, a dozen scientists choosing which scientific research and which white papers are valid and which ones aren't. In order for us to arrive at some uh, insight or knowledge about what we can do to improve our well-being. Like they figured this stuff out a long, long time ago. But there's this sort of like uh, almost an irrational exuberance and almost treating these things as if it's like a play toy or something to just be experimented with. And so it's like, let me go do ayahuasca, then this, then that, then this, then that. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. Slow things down a little bit. Because to your point, you might actually uncork more than what your mind or your body is prepared to handle in that particular moment. And even worse, if you do, let's say you go and do a 10-day Vipassana retreat, and then a giant pile of trauma comes flying out once you fall deep enough into meditation. You then leave and you go right back home to the unsupportive context. Right? You're sitting in your apartment and you're back in San Francisco and you're surrounded by all the noise of the city and the chaos of work, and it's like you don't have the support system around you anymore, and you just uncorked this big trauma that you're not quite ready to handle. So they need to be treated with the understanding and the respect that is necessary to like preserve those traditions and use them wisely.
Hmm. A lot of great points there, and yeah, it makes me kind of just kind of scoff at some of my early journey, and when I try to get really honest with myself. And my first kind of foray into a lot of these like kind of spiritual practices, and uh, my relationship with them was super transactional. I used like a very capitalistic way of looking at the world to these incredibly ancient, beautiful practices that should be held with so much reverence. It was like, I'm going to go to the Amazon and do ayahuasca because it's going to fix me. I'm going to, and I want the reward like right away. And, you know, I'm going
Yeah.
to start doing yoga and I'm going to start meditating. But even these things, great habits. But I was never really even meditating. Like, was I present? No, I knew that if I sat down for 30 minutes, tried to calm my mind and my nervous system, I would get a benefit from that. I could basically work longer. I was like using these things as fuel for to keep this well-oiled capitalist machine, you know, at a high level of output. And you know, this a very almost comical example is I flew down to the Amazon. I spent like 16 days deep in the Amazon jungle, no electricity, nothing, with this like tribe. Had this beautiful experience. Sat with Aya 4 times, had a really beautiful community there. And I left like a day early because I had to go catch a flight to Austin and do a talk the next day. And it was just the craziest thing. And I remember there was not like a language barrier to the shaman and the caranderos down there. We were having some like integration talks, and there was like a someone who could sort of translate. And I was kind of explaining him why I had to leave and what I was doing, and like his face was like, what the what are you talking
Yeah.
about? Like
Yeah.
that is the exact opposite of what you should be doing. Like you learned nothing, or you're an idiot. Like I didn't even have to hear what he was saying. It was all in his face.
Yeah,
I do
it's almost
remember
like, hey,
completely.
Hey, Mr. Shaman, can we do this integration over Zoom?
Yes, might as well have been. Might as well. I do remember completely. I remember looking because I'd written the talk that I was going to give, and I do remember reading it in my hotel room when I finally got there, and I was like, what is this? And I just scrapped the whole thing. And I think I just blabbed on about, I don't know, what I thought the meaning of life was for 20 minutes. I'm sure the crowd was thinking they were going to get sales and marketing tips. They're probably all very, very confused. Anyone who was at that summit, but um, yeah, these things. But
Well,
um,
to give a little bit of grace to you, to me,
mhm,
and to others in this position. Uh, well, you mentioned you're heading to India soon and spending time at an
mhm,
ashram. So let me dip into a little bit of the Hindu perspective on it. Well, one way to think about it is, you know, if we do live these multiple lives and we go through reincarnation, and in each life we learn lessons, and that's the purpose of reincarnation, is to inhabit this physical form, and this form comes with suffering and experiences, and it teaches us the things we need to learn for the purpose of developing our soul. And so maybe this is just one of the things along the
mhm,
process of developing the soul in the direction of godliness. So that's one
mhm,
way to think about it. And the other is, you know, if you look at the Hindu astrological calendar, they sort of have like this incredibly elaborate, really macro view of sort of the death and rebirth cycles of the cosmos, including the human experience. And just like we sort of take a regular calendar and break it into these like 30-day chunks, they
mhm,
have a calendar that's broken into its own appropriate chunks. And uh, the sort of epic that we're in, one is called the Kali Yuga, which is basically a time in human history where we're we are most disconnected from our spiritual selves, and as a result we're also most disconnected from spiritual and religious practices. And so we exist in a time in which, like I was mentioning, is um, there's been this total inversion, especially over the last 2000 years, where it's been like moving towards the hyper rational material mind and material viewpoint of the world, and away from the spiritual and esoteric. And along with that has come sort of this like collapse in preservation and the use of these spiritual practices. And so maybe you are sort of going through this process of waking up at a time where these practices largely don't exist, especially culturally within the West. And so you're trying to figure it out on your own, as I am.
mhm,
And you know that's one of the aspects of the Kali Yuga and the stage that we're in. This is how it works. So anyhow,
mhm.
I don't want to get too esoteric. People are probably being like, "What the hell is Andy talking about?" Like he used to talk about growth and shit. But let it be known that like I've changed quite a bit, and so has my worldview.
Yes, mhm. Yeah, it's nah, it is so funny. It does feel like that. It's just like we're so rational. We're so in our minds, all of society right now, and it's it's easy to look for the solutions that work in other parts of our lives, right? Like it's well, I'm hungry. I got like Uber Eats. It comes in 10 minutes and I'm super fucking sad and depressed. Like, where's the app for that? And we like tried and like things like Headspace and some of these apps they're okay, but again, it feels like it's this transaction. It's just like I want
It's
to do this
artificial.
quick. It's artificial, it might be a good stepping stone and it's probably better than no practice, but um, yeah, it's work for a reason. I feel very grateful to have carved out some time, and what I've come to learn is a pretty damn long life. So me, maybe not being productive for a few years is okay.
Oh yeah.
And I think surrender and retreat, I feel like words be so foreign to my psyche. Um, than a few years ago. It was like, played a lot of sports growing up and winning and attack and momentum and all of these things. And I think the idea of like surrender and retreat in our lives for periods is something that's really lost in the West. I think this idea of momentum in our careers is actually I did some reflecting on it, like kind of a poisonous idea. It's just keeping us going along this track. And I remember always in my career, I was like, I can't stop. Like, this is just a really intense period, and if I stop now, I'm going to lose all these like gains I did. I'm so close to this title, or I'm going to start making this much, and it feels like if you stop for a second, all this momentum is going to go away, and it's just simply not true. It's not true at all. Once you're able to get some space from whatever game you're choosing to play.
Yeah, and I mean, the word that comes to mind is unsustainable. Like
Mm-hmm.
the microcosm of the macro view, the microcosm is a ton of individuals uh, pushing relentlessly for more, 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 and it can't be sustained. And so you see people, quitting or opting out in one way or another, or suffering severe health issues and relational issues because they just keep plugging along. And we know it's like not sustainable for an entire lifetime for the vast majority of people. Nor is it even sustainable for like 30 years for for most people. The mind and the body eventually just says like, look, I'm too exhausted. I can't do this anymore. And something breaks. Something's got to give. And it's, those individual experiences are the microcosm of the macrocosm, which is like you can look at it at a planetary scale now and say, is this nonstop push for profit at all costs sustainable? No, it's just not. I'm not saying capitalism's evil. No, because that black and white thinking is not only is it not useful, it's not the truth. It's more nuanced than that. But all I'm advocating for is balance. I think that's all you're searching for in your life is balance. Something broke and it was like, I can't sustain this anymore. The thing that is sustainable is something that, let's hat tip to the Buddha. Like, what's the middle way here? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I think when folks like you and I sharing our individual stories is just the micro expression of what's happening more broadly. Things are going to change. They're going to have to change because the numbers just simply don't add up anyhow. It's like, um, will all industries and all companies and all countries continue to, for perpetuity, have constant economic growth? No. And
Mm-hmm.
why must that be the case? Like, we're living a pretty damn good life already. Why overshoot the mark and push ourselves into chronic illness and obesity and burnout because we're obsessing over more? Just stop.
Mm-hmm.
Seek balance. Things are going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think zooming out on the macro, I'm always kind of blown away when I do that exercise. It does feel like all our little micro journeys are also playing out on this grand uh, Earth scale, and then a kind of a cosmic level. Uh, it's the same lie, right? It's like an individual, and it's like momentum. Like, oh well, you've gone this far. You're now known as this person. You can't stop now. And same with like capitalism. It's been a great system. It's got its flaws, but it's allowed us to get to a pretty cool age, and a lot of disease has gone away.
Hmm.
Child mortality, great things. And like the argument is like, but we're in it now. But like that's just not true again. Like new systems can always arise. We can think, we
Yeah.
can pause. Um, but that's yeah. We're not very
Yeah,
good at pausing.
like I think about it in a simple way. It's like, okay, at the macro view, if you're a country and your primary metric is uh, compound annual growth rate of GDP, well, then you're going to get the results of that metric, both the positive and the negative. And and this is a drastic oversimplification. I don't have the answers to this. Only the creator of our universe does. But uh, just imagine, like, was it Tibet? If not Tibet, it's one of the Himalayan nations where their primary metric is basically gross national happiness. It's like a measure of internal well-being. And so it's like, what if you ran a country that is the product of some balance between gross national health, gross national happiness, gross domestic product, and gross environmental preservation? It's like, okay,
Mhm,
that all sounds good.
mhm,
And how
mhm,
do we get to that point? I don't know, through this chaotic process of like death and rebirth, creation and destruction, which you're going through at the individual level, and that we go through as a collective. And I just think we're in one of those moments, um, as a planet, and that's what we're experiencing. I think it's really interesting though, coming from the tech industry, and I'll be direct and critical here. Um, for as many intelligent people as there are in Silicon Valley, and for as much of this sort of like self-congratulating uh, uh, ideology that pervades it around being masters of the universe, it's like, well, you're also lacking a lot of wisdom, and none of you are seeking balance. I don't want to say none of you, but like, the masters of the universe sort of ethos is like, where's the wisdom there? Um, and very few of you can think in any other direction other than thinking that the only useful way to spend a life is to build a venture capital firm or build a multi-billion-dollar company. It's like, really? Is it that simple? Like,
mhm,
maybe for some of you, sure. If that's what like sings to your soul and plays to your strengths and you're just born for that, great. But for other people, like, don't fall into that trap that that's the only useful way to spend your life just because you were intelligent and talented and got into a Fortune 50 company. Don't fall for the Kool-Aid in that way. Like, there are other ways to spend a life, and the world needs people doing other things to establish that balance as we move our way forward. It's like,
mhm,
for example, I saw, I don't know, maybe it's 6 months ago or whatever, a comment from Mark Andreessen and Andreessen Horowitz. Again, incredible venture capital firm. These guys are super sharp, really talented at what they do.
mhm,
And there was some conversation about work-life balance and bringing your whole self to work. And their answer was, we don't want your whole self at work. And like, our goal is profit maximization. It's like, yeah, as a venture capitalist, that is your sole job. But like, let's be discerning when we hear messages like that and question whether or not that's the appropriate path for all of us, because it's just not. Let him
mhm,
go and do that. And then, Scott, if you're going to go and change your life and seek balance and attempt to contribute something else to the world other than compound annual growth rate, like, let's support and praise that. We need
mhm,
that balance.
mhm. Yeah,
So, yeah, as smart as these people may be and as successful as they are just as fallible. They are just as programmed as anyone else on the planet. They are nothing
mhm.
special in that respect, and their opinions can be questioned.
I agree. I agree. And they're worshiping something. They have their own gods. It usually looks like efficiency and profit. And there's a whole yeah. I'll use myself as a um, one to poke at again because a lot of these things we're describing, I was wrapped up a lot in this narrative, and I remember years ago. I was probably early 20s. And I was just starting to kind of like get successful. I made into tech and, I was laser focused and I make, $50 million. And I thought I was playing this like really complex game. And like, I've just chosen like the hardest path, but I'm like good at it because I'm smart and blah, blah, blah. And I had a buddy at the time, who was uh, literally like saving whales from Japanese whaling ships. He would like go out to like Antarctica and all these places and like shoot rancid butter on these boats and stuff. He's doing all this like great work to help the environment. And I remember talking to him and I was like telling him all these like grand plans I have. And I remember, and it did not land at all, but I remember him saying, like, that feels like such an easy game. Like, so you're just gonna, so you just want to make money? He's like, that, it seems easy. It seems like he was focusing on these like really complex problems where like, you can't like attack a Japanese whaling ship. You have to like use diplomacy and you have to like change hearts and minds and like trying to actually save our planet. Like that is a hard goal. Don't kid yourself that making as much money as possible is this grand, incredibly hard goal that you've figured out how to do. Like it's a, and it's okay to want things, but it's a small life to spend it in service of that singular goal of
Yeah, and I mean,
acquiring
how
things.
I can only imagine how beautiful of a feeling he had every time they were able to actually save one of those incredible animals. I'm sure he wasn't a financially successful person, but if you look at his karmic bank account, I bet that thing is loaded up.
Mhm. He's got a beautiful family now. He's a firefighter. He's always happy. He had it figured out way before I ever did. That's for sure. So Andy, um, you mentioned a few times, we don't have to get into this, but um, that recently you kind of uncovered a little bit of trauma. If you're comfortable speaking about that, I think it can be helpful for folks. I think one of the things I've learned on my own journey, and talking with a lot of folks is some of these really painful things can be more common than we think, and there can be a lot of shame, fear, um, that make us not look at them. And so, if you're comfortable diving in, it could be helpful for some.
Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate you asking that. I am comfortable with it. I'll share the details that I think are necessary because I, to tie it back to what we started with around sort of searching for a second mountain or what is this new thing that sustains you, this new source of meaning. The thing that sustains me and pulls me forward at this point is the opportunity to take suffering and to turn that into a medicine that you share with others. I believe that's what I'm on earth for. I really do. And um, you know, I had thought that I'd gotten to the bottom of the traumas, just to sort of give a quick inventory on it. Yeah, it was traumatic. My mom died when I was 10, and I worked through uh, that experience and those memories through the traumatic work or through the trauma work I did. Um, and then there were moments of like, there was a moment where Child Protective Services was called when I was younger to do a safety check on me because things weren't good. That was a hard day. I worked through that. Um, and then, even just seeing my mom in an open casket when I was 10, like brutal. That was hard. And I worked through that. And then there was just sort of like the general the loss of the love and connection that I needed due to her severe mental illness from her own really bad trauma when she was in psychiatric hospitals or just unable to care for children. Um, I, had worked through that. Um, and then there was something unexpected, which which I encountered actually in April of this year. So I had an experience. Um, I gave the term earlier. I mentioned it called a spiritual emergency, and it was coined by Stan and Christina Groff, who have done tremendous work in the field of transpersonal psychology, which is sort of the union between the spiritual and the psychological. And it's a field that I'm really drawn to because these experiences I've had have revealed to me that there is a connection between the two. And so what had happened was, and this was the first time I'm sharing this, um, and so I'll move through it the way that I can. Um, but it was on Good Friday this year, and my dad texted me and he said, "Hey, do you want to go to church?" And Good Friday, for folks who don't know, is the last day of Lent, Christian Catholic faith, and it's symbolic of the day that Christ died on the cross. Um, and I hadn't planned on it. You know, when he texted me, he said, "Hey, you want to go to church?" And I said, "Well, what time?" He said, "Oh, it's at noon." And I picked up my phone, and it was 11:11 a.m. And that number matters because for anyone, if you're curious, go and study the term synchronicities. But this number 1111 has occurred um, coincidentally at so many times over the last 4 years for me during very pivotal moments in my journey. I'd see these patterns of repeating numbers. And 1111 often for me would occur in these synchronistic moments within the connotation of Christianity and Christ. It had happened on many occasions to where the astronomical probability is extremely low. This is the point of a synchronicity. It's like it's something that probabilistically is impossible, but it's almost as if something is piercing through the veil to reach out to you in that moment and give you a message. And this is one of the seminal contributions from folks like Carl Jung. And so I see it's 11:11, and then my whole body lights up, you know, and that sort of energetic goosebumps feeling as it had on prior occasions. And I sort of looked up and I said, "Okay, yeah, I'll go." And as I drove to church, my heart was pounding. And I get into church, walk through the front doors, get situated, and then my gaze turned to the cross. And I just became completely transfixed by it, where I wasn't listening to the pastor, the music, or anything else that was going on. I was entirely absorbed by the cross and this deep felt understanding of what it meant. And for me, that meant the surrender of the self, to let go, to allow the self to die so that something else more important can be reborn, and to surrender and let the guard down and let out whatever needs to be expressed, and to surrender the self for a higher purpose, to put my selfish wants and needs and preferences aside. And in that experience of being completely engrossed in my relation and my felt experience of the cross at the time, my entire body began to shake and tremor. I now understand why the Quakers were called the Quakers. Um, Heart pounding, my whole body shaking uncontrollably from top to bottom, tears pouring down my face. And just to overcome with the power and the presence of something beyond myself. And I wept and I wept and I wept, and I was trying to hold it together as the tremors and the shaking became more intense. and I could feel rising from the pit of my stomach that I was going to scream. And I told my dad, I need to run outside. I don't want to scream in church. And I ran outside and I dropped to the ground, and a primal scream came out as my whole body continued to tremor, and I was sweating and I was sobbing and screaming. And that lasted for about 30 minutes. My dad had come outside and was comforting me. And it was this huge emotional and energetic purge. And I thought it had passed. I'd had similar smaller purges somewhat spontaneously in the months leading up to that. Sometimes when I'd pray, sometimes when I was in a spiritual group, same sort of experience would come out. I didn't know what it was. The pastor said, well, this is the Holy Spirit at work. And I go home that day and thinking that this had passed. And then the next day it happened again for about 2 hours. All I could do was lay on the bed, and my whole body was shaking and convulsing. I was coughing and screaming and sobbing, and just an incredible, overwhelming outpouring of emotion and energy. And then Easter Sunday came, and it was pure peace. I was completely at peace. It felt like like I had been reborn, a resurrection of sorts. I wasn't Christian or Catholic. Sure, I went to church sometimes as a kid. And so this didn't come from like a deep rooted sense of connection, but it was alive in me. And again, I thought it had passed. And then on Monday, it came back again 2 more times. And it had pushed me to a point where I feared I was on the verge of psychosis. And that's the nature of why they call it spiritual emergencies. In Hindu cultures, they may call this a Kundalini crisis. In shamanic cultures, they call it a shamanic crisis. The cultures around the world have a term for this. It's the experience that some saints and mystics and poets have experienced. These overwhelming, spiritually initiated experiences that can not only connect you to the divine, to have a direct experience of that thing that we call God, but can also bring about a tremendous purging of pain and emotion. And I experienced both. But in the deepest part, the hardest part of that experience is I just laid in bed as my dad held my hand, my brother held my hand, and I went through it. And that's when an image that burst through from my consciousness of being sexually abused when I was very young. At an age where I couldn't do anything about it, couldn't fight. Uh, and that's what burst through, initiated by a spiritual connection for the purpose of helping me purge that out and to, to be emptied out of this thing that was deeply, deeply buried in my mind and that sat beneath the surface, festering for a long time. So after 4 days of that, just barely surviving it, I somehow resourced myself, got a lot of support around me, got professional support, sought spiritual support and help, turned to some medication temporarily to just help my overwhelmed nervous system because it had reactivated pure terror. And it took me about 4 months to like really, really feel like I could function again after that. And it's something that I'm still working through, as you can tell. Conversations like this are cathartic for me, so I'm glad that we're having it. I'm not saying that everyone needs to experience something like this in order to heal our deepest wounds. I think this is just part of this life path for me in this lifetime. All those experiences, I went through them. and I had to learn how to heal myself so that I could take those experiences and, like I said, turn it into a medicine that hopefully I can give to others. But like the
Thank you,
deepest healing is
brother.
possible, and there's a deepening peace that can be found on the other end of all this. And I'm moving closer and closer to it as time goes on. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to. Um, for anyone else who's experienced something like this, um, I'm available to help share the tools and the resources that helped me along the way. Yeah.
Thank you, and for sharing that. It was. I feel honored to witness that and see the courage and the bravery to share that. And thank you for sharing that with me and folks that are listening. I have been fortunate to be in some groups of men that will talk openly and share as you just did. And it's so rare that um, men speak out. It's virtually doesn't exist in our society that you can look at examples of. There are for females, abuse survivors that talk, but you really can barely find a man, and it is much more common than folks think. And so anyone listening to this, I would take Andy up on his beautiful offer, and yeah, just witnessing that courage, man.
Yeah.
It's
I appreciate it, and it's the beauty of it is, it's led me to the work that I'm now leaning into. Um, Something I get to share for the first time as well, which is, I had sought help from um, a spiritual guide, and that person has been working with people to assist them through these so-called spiritual emergencies for over 40 years. Um, an incredible human being, and she helped me a lot. And through this direct experience of it, I learned through the school of hard knocks of like this intersection between spirituality, psychology, and just uh, human flourishing. I think in this hyper rational world that we live in this very material lens, if it's not math or physics, we don't believe it. And I'm just here to say that like the spiritual aspect of life is just as real as math and physics. We've just lost touch with it. Not everyone. It's just another texture of this thing that we call reality. There are things uh, beyond sense perception that are involved in the orchestration of this experience we're having. And my experience with it is it deeply cares for us. And uh, the work that I'm now doing, I recently became what's called a certified spiritual emergence coach. And so now I'm trained to be able to help and support and be with people as they move through these very difficult experiences that unfortunately the sort of current modern Western paradigm of mental health just completely excludes it. You can go through this 1,000-page tome of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that is basically the dictionary of mental illness. And you'll maybe find like a one-line carve-out that was only recently added that recognizes, the role of religion and spirituality in somebody's well-being. And it is so deeply stitched into the collective consciousness of humankind. And a way to think about uh, the uh, you can uh, a way to think about religion and spirituality and the stories and the mythology in that is that if you really learn to understand the messages that are being communicated through the symbolism and the metaphors contained in these ancient texts, you'll realize that this was psychology before psychology was invented. These are lessons about the nature of the human experience and how to move through difficult experiences in life. You know, how to literally go through a death and rebirth, captured so brilliantly and beautifully by the story and the life of Jesus Christ and the symbol of the cross itself. This is the manual on how to survive and how to move through life and how to evolve. And I just recently joined as the co-executive director for Integrative Mental Health University, which is specifically focused on training healthcare practitioners to be spiritually competent. You can go through and get a PhD and get your licensing and so on and so forth. But if somebody like me comes to your office and has these experiences that are so deeply interlaced with something that is spiritually transformative, they don't know anything about it. They're incapable of supporting, or even worse, and this happens still, this happens frequently. I've spoken with and I did training with psychiatric nurses that can tell me that this is true, that if somebody has these so-called mystical experiences that may then bring them into an extreme state, a more heightened emotional state that then bears similarity to the symptoms of schizophrenia and psychoses, they will do the opposite of actually what that person needs. The standard psychiatric protocol now is for somebody who's in one of these experiences is to first say this is a severe mental disorder and to assume that there's no transformative benefit there. Second, you hospitalize them. Third, you effectively tranquilize them with really powerful antipsychotics, which stops this process from continuing and allowing it to potentially resolve. And then you isolate that person by putting him in a hospital room. And I know many people that I've met along the way where what was happening was actually this, yes, intense, overwhelming experience that was really difficult to get through, but it was a sign of a fractured psyche attempting to resolve itself. And instead of like giving that person connection and love and support and helping them through it, the way that I was able to just lay there with my dad and my brother holding my hand to love me and support me through it and let my nervous system know I was going to be okay. Well, then just isolate them and tranquilize them and stigmatize them by referring to them as the schizophrenic in room 5. You know, so this is the work that I'm leaning into now, and this is the work of the organization I joined, is to help the modern mental health paradigm recognize like not all of these experiences are pure signs of mental disorder or illness. Maybe there's healing and transformative potential there. And what can we do to evolve the current mental health paradigm so that it embraces these spiritual experiences? Because God, we need it.
God, we need it. Man, that what a beautiful way to spend this next chapter of your life, and everything you're saying there is spot on with how I witness the world right now, and the state of this mental health crisis, which it is a crisis. We have, just huge swaths of the population just on various medications of all kinds. They come easier now than ever. And if that, like what I'm hearing is like, yeah, and it just makes intellectual sense. Like these sometimes trying to teach us something, right? Like these are things that our body is a fine tuned machine from evolution for, thousands and thousands of years. And when these tremors come, or it's experiencing grand symbols, like this is ancient wisdom that is trying to move through our body. And we don't want to just get away with it. That's a bug. Get rid of it. Cancel it. Like these can be features for the human experience, the understanding. Um, that's
Yeah,
really cool work. I'm excited to follow you in that journey.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, and perhaps this body is just a wrapper that sits on something else that you can call the soul. Perhaps the fundamental element underlying most of what we call mental illness today is potentially, sure, trauma informed, lifestyle informed, or lifestyle related. All that is true, but maybe at its deepest level, it's a spiritual ailment. It's the lack of
Mm.
connection to something bigger than ourselves that pulls us out of our narcissistic, myopic view. Maybe that's what's sitting underneath it.
I, from my worldview, it is. We are all that light, that love, that soul. That is what we are, all of us. And man, that's really powerful work that you're embarking on, and I hope that I know it will have ripples through like all of modern mental health, how we approach healthcare. Been able to go to a few kind of retreats and things, and you go to some of these retreats that again bring you around community, hold your hand, and do these like just such warmth, and then you juxtapose that to like and you compare it to like a modern hospital and like some of these things they're so disconnected, um, and anything that is bringing those two closer is beautiful, and I want to help any way I can through this platform, through anything.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited.
I appreciate it. And maybe a quick story, and maybe this would be a good way to wrap it up. It was 2022 where I was sort of traveling and searching and healing in the way that you are right now. And I went to northern Thailand. Specifically, I was in the Chiang Mai area, and I went to uh, an animal rescue, an elephant sanctuary up in the northern hills of Thailand. An incredible place called Elephant Nature Park, run by two living saints, as far as I'm concerned. And it's sort of nestled in this river valley, and at this point they have several dozen elephants and 100 water buffalo, hundreds of dogs and cats. Now there's a 500 person community of the locals who all work there. It's just this sanctuary for everyone who's involved, and they're most known for the work that they do with rescuing abused and injured elephants that typically come from uh, I guess you can call it like the commercial entertainment side of things, where these elephants are basically abused and traumatized and forced to sort of perform like circus act type things. And uh, these elephants, understandably, have severe behavioral issues, and they're weary of people. They're dangerous to be around at first because they've been so traumatized. And it was while I was there, I spent 2 weeks there just doing manual labor, making food, shoveling elephant poop, whatever, right? And I was just paying attention to like, what do they have to teach us about what it means to heal? And I realized, like, oh, wow, the answer's here, observing what animals do. And it was quite simple, really, which was, this elephant that's been abused, first you bring it in. And if it needs its own space for a while, you give it its own space. You just let it decompress, but you nurture it. You feed it good food. You give it whatever space and exercise it needs. And then you eventually, like Caesar does, you incorporate it into the pack, into the herd. And the caretakers there just give the elephants nothing but love. Like that is the medicine. Actually, the woman who started it, her name is Lek Chyler. very sort of famous within, that sort of sector of life, and for good reason. But she sings lullabies to these elephants, sings them to sleep. She nurtures them like a mother. And with enough time, it becomes an elephant again. And so there's no pill that can replace what love and connection can do. There's it just can't even come close to it. And the absence of love and connection within our healthcare industry is clear. And look, I want to be very clear. Like you mentioned earlier, there's all these benefits of modern technology and the systems we built. We live a lot longer than we used to for those systems that we've designed. I'm simply encouraging it to evolve and to find its balance. And in the mental health care industry, it's like, what can we do to incorporate the aspects of an ashram, right, into that experience of helping somebody mend their wounds, whether physical or psychological? Because it's built into us to feel that inherent vitality and to feel alive again when we're loved and connected. And if that love and connection is absent from the equation of how to help somebody get over anxiety or depression or addiction or trauma, whatever it may be, then you have an incomplete system of care. It's as simple as that. So yeah, our animals teach us a lot.
That they do. Uh, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. Uh, Annie, I want to thank you again for sharing your story, so open, authentic, bringing all of you, and I know it's going to benefit a lot of people, and to witness everything that you've gone through, and to land it. I want to spend my life reducing suffering and turning that into love is beautiful, man. And it's one final thing that we have in common now. Is just after my last retreat I did, my life motto used to be pretty self-serving. It was, I want to spend my life solving interesting problems with interesting people, and along the way, I want to help as many people as I can. That was kind of like
Mm.
almost an afterthought, was the help, and now it's just simply I want to transmute fear and pain into love, yeah, for myself and for others. So I'll join you on that mission in our own ways, brother. And I see
Yeah,
you, and I appreciate you.
yeah, and you're doing it, Scott. And just know that you're not alone along the way. Okay.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And to all our listeners, I hope you filled you up as much as this conversation did for me. And we'll see you next week.